Kenneth MacArthur was not my best friend, but he was my only friend. My mom had moved once again in Miami. We had gone to a run-down part of town full of old homes and trees and cheap chain-link fences, bordering yards full of mutts and the occasional cars up on bricks. Kenneth was the next-door neighbor's child. He was a bit curly-headed, thin and short for his age, which was about 12 going on 20. I was 11. Kenneth was one of the most intense persons I ever met. He wasn't a bad person. He wasn't a mean person or liar or thief or prone to violence, but he could not sit still for a second and had the attention span of a dragonfly at noon. I had seen him outside after we moved in, but never talked to him, being introverted, and after being dragged myself off to my new school, which I hated, I soon met up with him. The first thing he ever said to me was on the playground. He asked, "You want to see my knife?" I did, but I didn't. The story of my life. I decided it was probably better to say yes than no, and he showed me his Boy Scout folding knife and opened up all 3 blades one by one, each one unnecessarily extra sharp. The other children had seemed to wander off on the playing field. We stood next to a wooden light pole near the basketball courts. He asked me if I wanted to fight. It really wasn't so much of a question either. I tried to wiggle my way out of it, but he seemed very fond of the idea. Now, other than drinking until he passed out from all the yelling and commotion, my stepfather's favorite thing to do in the whole world was to watch professional wrestling on TV. Florida professional wrestling, to be more exact, with the wonderful Gordon Soley, the Missouri Mauler, the Great Malenko, my lucky town, Haystack Calhoun, Sputnik Monroe. I knew all their names. I knew all their moves. But I did not want to wrestle or become a wrestler, even think I could. But through osmosis of being glued to the TV 8 hours every Saturday, watching grown men apply the dreaded figure 4 leg lock, the power driver, and the sleeper, I loved the sleeper. I did not feel the need or desire to turn tail and run away from Kenneth MacArthur. I finally got him to agree, which was hard. If I was to get him on the ground, we would quit, as I didn't want to fight to begin with. He agreed, and I began to step back away from him, and he advanced. I speeded up, walking backwards, and he rushed forwards towards me. I stopped and grabbed his shirt collar with both hands, and then leaped up into the air and planted my feet into his belly, and hung on and pulled him down to the ground with my weight, and then extended my legs and flipped him up over me onto his back. I got up as quickly as I could and told him the fight was over. He was surprised, embarrassed, and angry, and thought that I had not fought him fair and wanted to continue. I reminded him we had made a deal. Kenneth never asked me to fight him again. I have also never been able to grab a person that wanted to fight me by the shirt collar and not get the crap beat out of me again. We soon became friends, and being exposed to his family was a source of constant entertainment and education. It seemed half his large family were either Jehovah's Witnesses, busily trying to convert the neighborhood, or ex-convicts, rolling their own cigarettes at tables full of brown quart bottles of Regal beer, drifting through life, awaiting the intervention of angels or the carelessness of their parole officers. Sometimes their church would have fish fries, which I liked, and the family would all go out and catch mullet or catfish and bring them home, and Kenneth and I would clean them in the yard. It was one of the few things Kenneth seemed to be able to stay focused on. His parents would let him use wicked thin silvery fillet knives, and he would take each fish apart, piece by piece, down to the eyeballs. My bedroom faced Kenneth's house, and his bedroom faced mine, across the yard full of mango and avocado trees. Sometimes at night he would flash his flashlight through my window to let me know he wanted me to come over and be an accomplice to some new trouble he had conjured up. One night around 10 o'clock he flashed the light. It was too late for me to come out. After a while I heard him tapping at the window. I opened it up and he began whispering he was going to run away. He wanted me to help him and go with him. I climbed out and walked over to his house, which this time of night half the people were just waking up. Kenneth wanted to run away and didn't want to stay home anymore. He explained to me all the problems he was having and how wonderful it would be if we both ran away. Now I had no reason to run away, but Kenneth was a pretty and very persuasive person, and at this point in my life I had about all the self-determination and direction of a small chicken feather floating on a pond. He explained to me I was to go to my house and gather some food and meet him back at his house at 2 o'clock in the morning. By then most everyone would be in bed or gone, and we could leave then. He was going to steal his Uncle Wally's car. Uncle Wally had one of those Buick Rivieras in which the rear windows were shaped and aligned with the trunk of the car to make it look like it was the front, so when you were behind it, the Riviera looked like it was coming at you. The Riviera seemed to be about the biggest car in the neighborhood. Uncle Wally didn't park it in the driveway, but drove it out into the grass behind the house under the trees, and the sap from the mangoes would fall down and leave ugly black stains on his car. Wally said he kept it there because it was cooler for the car. But he wasn't worried about the sun damage. He was worried about the repo man. I went home and got a brown paper grocery bag and rummaged up some food for our escape. I got half a loaf of wholesome white bread, a jar of peanut butter and jelly, and a bag of Doritos. I had read about people in lifeboats surviving weeks on a fish head, and figured this would take us for as far as we were going. I drifted off to sleep, but kept waking up every hour or so and pressed the button on my Timex indigo glow-in-the-dark watch to see what time it was. At 2:15, I was at Kenneth's house, ready to fly. Kenneth did not seem nervous at all. He had managed to get his uncle's keys, and we snuck out to the Buick parked under the trees. We spoke in whispers. Kenneth seemed a little slow. He wasn't his usual hyper self. Wanting to run away and actually doing it are two different things. I wasn't really running away. I was just an enabler, coming along for the ride to see what oddities and peculiarities were going to pop up next. Kenneth was happy to see the Doritos, but made a face when he saw the peanut butter and jelly. We skulked through the yard like ninjas with the brown paper bag. Uncle Wally's car was even bigger at night, and it was even bigger when you had the keys in your hand and didn't know how to drive and had never driven before. We opened the doors and both got in the front seat, and when he put the key in the switch, the door chimes began chiming, softly, in a most accusing tone. There was also a wonderful, hypnotic, and comforting electric blue light coming from the radio and the dashboard. I asked Kenneth if he knew where we were going, and he replied, "Away the hell from here." I asked him if he had ever driven a car before, and he paused a long time before he answered. You don't need to know how to drive. You just keep the hood between the lines and stop before you hit something. When Kenneth shut his door and turned the key halfway, the other lights came on in the dashboard and on the automatic transmission. The transmission was positioned all the way forward next to the letter P. Kenneth turned the key all the way and started the engine. It was louder than we had hoped. We knew we had to get out of there amongst all that darkness and anticipation. Kenneth put his foot on the brake and his hand on the shift, but he looked puzzled. There were so many letters and numbers on the transmission gear shift. Neither one of us knew what they were for. Kenneth asked me, what was the letter R for? I responded in a questioning tone, racing? Kenneth replied, yeah, racing. And without turning on the headlights, put the car in gear, selected R for racing, took his foot off the brake, and accelerated. While trying to run away in the night in Uncle Wally's 1972 Buick Riviera, we accelerated backwards through the darkness amongst the fruit trees and stars and clouds and moon until we hit and uprooted a very small lychee nut tree and stopped. Kenneth turned off the car and left the keys in it faster than he could say, "You want to see my knife?" and ran into his house, leaving me alone in the dark car with the brown paper bag of Doritos and peanut butter and jelly. I got out and went home and back to bed. In the months ahead, I spent less time with Kenneth and his family, and it was not long before my family found the need to move once again. I found out years later that Kenneth had eventually gone to prison. I think it was Rayford. As best as I could find out, he had gotten involved with something concerning dynamite. Sometimes I blame myself. If I'd only known what R really stood for, who knows how far those Doritos would have taken us. Away the hell from here.